bombing. And right before he died,
I came across this story about an 8-year-old boy who lived near Condon Terrace named Jimmy. And in the article that was written by a woman named Janet said Jimmy was a heroin addict and had needle marks on his arm. It also said he got hooked at 5 years old. So my mind was blown at the time, like, damn man, that's sick. An 8-year-old heroin addict who had a mom that didn't have a problem with him not only using heroin, but also talking about selling drugs in the Condon Terrace area later. So as I kept reading, I found out the story was made up. It was a lie created by this woman, Janet Cook, who used to work for the Washington Post.
The story was page 1 last September. Janet Cook wrote about a little boy hooked on heroin by his mother's lover. A story the Post said yesterday was simply not true.
She had not interviewed an 8-year-old heroin addict, and that the quotes attributed to him were fabricated.
The story was published with the Post back in 1980, and it even went on to win a Pulitzer Prize. To make a long story short, the lady Janet resigned from the Washington Post later. She also admitted to fabricating the story. Apparently, she was kind of new to the Post, super ambitious, looking for a home run story to get that clout, and people all over the world was shocked. I mean, we talking about an 8-year-old heroin addict. She had everybody looking for Jimmy. They launched a search for the boy because some of the people in the area didn't believe the story. Even the mayor, Marion Barry, got involved.
Well, first of all, let me put that story in context. Dr. Elise Galati, who heads a drug education program at Howard for the city in the sense of 25 seaters, had a long series of interviews and discussions with Janet Cook of the Washington Post about this family and other families and other problems in the city around drug addiction. And the reporter went, I guess, and interviewed the family. We know, Dr. Galati knows generally where the person lives. As a result of the posted stories this morning, Dr. Galati called me because I was trying to get the family to agree to let me and others come out and get the young fella and get the mother and get him into treatment. But she called Dr. Galati this morning, and Dr. Galati is a psychiatrist, and she said to Dr. Galati she's left home, she's in hiding because she doesn't want to be either arrested or a child taken from her. So we don't know where the family is right now.
But after all of this, years later, Janet and an old co-worker sold the movie rights to the story, Jimmy's World, for $1.6 million in the mid-90s. No movie was ever made from it, but I'm sure she don't care. $1.6 million for a story that she fabricated.
I read in the paper this morning that somebody in the administration said it, but I don't believe half what I read in the paper, so I just read it.
So after realizing the story was fake, I asked myself, why Condon Terrace? So being as though there was a lot of rough neighborhoods in D.C. and Janet was from Ohio, what made her specifically choose Condon Terrace of all places? I think the answer lies in an article titled the meanest street in Washington. At the top of 1980, Condon Terrace was called the meanest street in town, and I believe that's what prompted Janet to make the area the center stage of her story. The article about Condon Terrace Circle was published with the Washington Post January 28, 1980. The story titled Jimmy's World was released in the Post September 1980, 8 months later. So the Condon Terrace article was written by Cortland Malloy. Hope I'm saying that last name right. But here's a quote. When a Washington Post photographer drove into the circle on Saturday, he was chased out by teenagers hurling bricks and bottles at his car. For a year now, kneecappings have been one of the forms of retaliation against both outsiders and those from within who threaten the order of the circle. Condon Terrace Circle was described as a notorious location in 1980, and it was said that the violence that occurred was mainly over drug sales, with hundreds of shootings that occurred around the circle over the years. So by 1984, it was the 800 block of Condon Terrace that they said became a heavy PCP market with a ton of drug traffic. And that made police target and put together an undercover operation at two locations, the 800 block of Condon Terrace and the same thing over at Robinson Place Southeast. They hit both spots at the same time. They called it Operation C-Note. So if you look at the map of DC, look at Condon Terrace, in Washington Highlands, at the bottom of the map is the deep south, southeast. In my opinion, the way they mapped the city in the beginning was crazy. And it's not just the city, really, it's an in general thing. But the way they broke down and created and named quadrants and wards, then communities within the wards, then the neighborhoods within the communities, and made it all tie together, it was very thorough. The community was built on hills, and that's why they named it Washington Highlands. And before the Europeans arrived, Native Americans actually lived in the Highlands. It was a whole tribe of people called the Nacotchtank people. And they was living their best life as much as they could up until the European settlers arrived and brought diseases that wiped out tribes of people. Not just the Nacotchtank people, but surrounding areas as well. The surviving Native Americans in DC was said to have battled another tribe named the Piscataway people over territory. Meanwhile, the settlers continued to arrive, and once they got their hands on the land, it was a wrap. The tribe slowly disappeared. The wilderness became farms where slaves worked in the fields in the 1800s. And then later, in the 1900s, the real development of roads and neighborhoods took place that sort of shaped the Washington Highlands area. Because of World War II, so many new people flocked to the city in need of housing, and Congress created a plan that provided low-income housing to defense workers. So in 1942, they built the 256-unit Highland dwellings, and the year after that, more and more new low-income homes were built. In fact, Washington Highlands was one of the first areas in the city where housing was desegregated.
2 to the 2, 3 to 2, 1. I step out on my corner with my box of rocks. Drummer covers my hood from blocks and blocks. See my homie that I slang with. Hit him up with the deuce thumb thing shit. Back then it came with the love. Cause niggas wasn't tripping over scratch. Cause we took turns and we both stacked stacks. And if you had a customer, you had it for life. Cause Brad the true hustler, Brad is a right. Cause if we gonna stack cheese, then